Let's talk about timelines. Specifically timelines to AGI or ASI. Is it fair, like, as a starting point, to say that nobody really agrees on the definitions of AGI and ASI?
I kind of think there's a lot of disagreement, but I've been getting pushback where a lot of people kind of say the same thing, which is like a thing that could reproduce most digital economic work. So like the remote worker is a fairly reasonable example. And I think OpenAI's definition is somewhat related to that, which is like an AI that can do a lot of like a certain number of economically valuable tasks, which I don't really love as a definition, but I think it could be a grounding point because language models today, while immensely powerful, are not this remote worker drop in, and there are things that you could think of that could be done by an AI that are way harder than remote work, which are like finding an unexpected scientific discovery that you couldn't even posit, which would be an example of something that somebody says is like an artificial superintelligence problem, or like taking in all medical records and finding linkages across certain illnesses that people didn't know, or figuring out that some common drug can treat some niche cancer. Like they would say that is like a super intelligence thing. So these are kind of natural tiers. My problem with it is that it becomes deeply entwined with like the quest for meaning of AI and this religious aspects to it. So there's different paths you can take it.
And I don't even know if the remote work is a good definition, because what exactly is that? It's like perfect tool use. I don't know if you like the originally titled AI 27 report. They focus more on code and research taste. So the target there is the superhuman coder. So they have several milestone systems: superhuman coder, superhuman AI researcher, then super intelligent AI researcher, and then the full ASI, artificial superintelligence. But after you develop the superhuman coder, everything else follows quickly. There, the task is to have a fully autonomous, like, automate coding. So any kind of coding you need to do in order to perform research is fully automated. And from there, humans would be doing AI research together with that system, and they will quickly be able to develop a system that's actually can do the research for you. That's the idea. And then initially their prediction was 2027, 28, and now they've pushed it back by 3 to 4 years to 2031 mean prediction. Probably my prediction is even beyond 2031, but at least you can, in a concrete way, think about how difficult it is to fully automate programming.
Yeah, I disagree with some of their presumptions and dynamics on how it would play out. But I think they did good work in the scenario defining milestones that are concrete and to tell a useful story, which is why the reach for this AI 2027 document well transcended Silicon Valley, is because they told a good story and they did a lot of rigorous work to do this.
Mhm.
I think the camp that I fall into is that like AI is like so-called jagged, which will be excellent at some things and really bad at some things. I think that when they're close to this automated software engineer, what it will be good at is that traditional ML systems and front end, the model is excellent at, but the distributed ML, the models are actually really quite bad at because there's so little training data on doing large scale distributed learning and things. And this is something that we already see. And I think this will just get amplified. And then it's kind of messier in these trade offs. And then there's like, how do you think AI research works and so on?
So you think basically superhuman coder is almost unachievable, meaning, like, because of the jagged nature of the thing, you're just always going to have gaps in capabilities.
I think it's assigning completeness to something where the models are kind of superhuman at some types of code, and I think that will continue. And people are creative, so they'll utilize this like incredible abilities and like to fill in the weaknesses of the models and move really fast. And it'll always kind of be this. I've perceived for a long time this dance between the humans are enabling this thing that the model can't do, and the best AI researchers are the ones that can enable this superpower.
Mhm.
And I think this aligns like to what we already see. I think like Claude Code for building a website, you can stand up a beautiful website in a few hours or do data analysis. And I don't think it's going to keep getting better at these things, and it'll pick up some new code skills and stuff that it'll get along the way. And kind of linking to what's happening in big tech is like this AI 2027 report is like leans into the singularity idea where I think research is messy and social and largely in the data in ways that AI models can't process. But like what we do have today is really powerful, and these tech companies are all collectively buying into this with tens of billions of dollars of investment. So like we are going to get some much better version of ChatGPT, a much better version of Claude Code than we already have.
Mhm.
I think that it's just like hard to predict where that is going, but the like bright clarity of that future is why some of the most powerful people in the world are putting so much money into this. And I think it's just kind of small differences between like we don't actually know what a better version of ChatGPT is, but also like can it automate AI research? I would say probably not, at least in this time frame. Like big tech is going to spend $100 billion much faster than we get a automated AI researcher that enables a AI research singularity.
So you think your prediction would be what? Like, if this is even a useful milestone, we're more than 10 years out.
I would say less than that on the software side, but I think longer than that on the things like research.
Let's just like, for fun, try to imagine a world where all software writing is fully automated.
Like
Can you imagine that world?
by the end of this year, the amount of software that'll be automated will be so high. But it's like it'll be the things of like you're trying to train a model with RL and you need to have multiple bunches of GPUs communicating with each other. That'll still be hard, but I think it'll be much easier.
One of the ways to think about this, so the full automation of programming, is just think of like lines of useful code written, the fraction of that to the number of humans in the loop. So presumably there'll be for a long time humans in the loop of software writing. It's just be fewer and fewer relative to the amount of code written, right? And the SC superhuman coder, I think the presumption there is it goes to zero, the number of humans in the loop. What does that world look like when the number of humans in the loop is in the hundreds, not in the hundreds of thousands?
I think software engineering will be driven more to system design and goals of outcomes, where I do think software is largely going to be. Come on, I think this has been happening over the last few weeks where people have gone from a month ago of like, oh, yeah, agents are kind of slop, which is a famous Carpathy quote, to like the what is a little bit of a meme of like the industrialization of software when anyone can just create software at their fingerprints. Like, I do think we are closer to that side of things, and it takes direction and like understanding how the systems work to extract that best from the language models. And I think it's hard to like accept the gravity of how much is going to change with software development and how many more people can do things without ever looking at
I
it.
think what's interesting is to think about whether these systems will be independent, like completely independent in the sense that, well, I have no doubt that LLMs will kind of at some point solve coding in a sense like calculators solve calculating, right? So at some point humans developed a tool that, you never need a human to calculate that number. You just type it in and it's an algorithm. You can do it in that sense. And I think that's the same probably for coding. But the question is, so I think what will happen is, yeah, you will just say build that website, it will make a really good website, and then you maybe refine it. But will it do things independently where, will you be still having humans asking the AI to do something? Like, will there be a person say build that website, or will there be AI that just builds websites or something, or whatever?
I think talking about building websites is
It's too simple.
it's
Yeah,
just like
fair.
there's the problem with
Mhm.
websites and the problem with the web, HTML and all that kind of stuff. It's very resilient to just
Mhm.
slop.
Yeah.
It will show you slop. It's good at showing slop. I would rather like think of like safety critical systems, like asking AI to end generate something that manages logistics
Mhm.
or manages cars, a
Mhm.
fleet of cars, all that kind of stuff. So end
Yeah.
to end
Yeah.
generates that for you.
I think a more intermediate example is take something like Slack or Microsoft Word. I think if the organizations allow it, AI could very easily implement features end to end and do a fairly good job for like things that you want to try. You want to add a new like tab in Slack that you want to use, and I think AI will be able to do that pretty well.
Actually, that's a really great example. How far away are we from that?
Like this year,
See, I don't know. I don't know.
I guess
I
I
don't
don't know
know.
how bad production code bases are, but I think that within like on the order of low years, a lot of people are going to be pushed to be more of like a designer and product manager, where you have multiple of these agents that can try things for you, and they might take 1 to 2 days to implement a feature or attempt to fix a bug. And you have these dashboards, which I think Slack is actually a good dashboard where your agents will talk to you and you'll then give feedback. But things like I make a website, it's like you want to make a logo that's passable. Like I think these like cohesive design things and this style is going to be very hard for models and deciding on what to add at the next time.
So I hang out with a lot of programmers, and some of them are a little bit on the skeptical side in general. That's just vibe-wise, they're like that. I just think there's a lot of complexity involved in adding features to complex systems. Like if you look at the browser, Chrome, if I wanted to add a feature, if I wanted to have tabs as opposed to up top, I want them on the left side. Interface, right? I think this is not a next year thing.
One of the Claude releases this year, one of their tests was we give it a piece of software and leave Claude to run to recreate it entirely. And it could already almost rebuild Slack from scratch, just given the parameters of the software and left in a sandbox
So from the
environment to do it.
scratch part, I like almost better.
So it might be that the smaller, newer companies are advantaged, and they're like, we don't have to have the bloat and complexity, and therefore this future exists.
And I think this gets to the point that you mentioned that some people you talk to are skeptical, and I think that's not because the LLM can't do X, Y, Z. It's because people don't want it to do it this way.
Some of that could be a skill issue on the human side. Unfortunately, we have to be honest with ourselves. And some of that could be an under-specification issue. So programming, you're just assuming this is like in relationships and friendships, communication type of issue. You're assuming the LM somehow is supposed to read your mind. I think this is where spec-driven design is really important. Like you just using natural language, specify like what you want.
I think that's like if you talk to people at the labs, they use these in their training and production code. Like Claude Code is built with Claude Code, and they all use these things extensively. And Dario talks about how much of Claude's code. Oh, and it's like these people are slightly ahead in terms of the capabilities they have, and they probably spend on inference. They could spend 10 to 100 plus X as much as we're spending. Like we're on a lowly $100 or $200 a month plan. Like they truly let it rip. And I think that like with the pace of progress that we have, it seems like where a year ago we didn't have Claude Code and we didn't really have reasoning models. And it's like the difference between sitting here today and what we can do with these models. And it seems like there's a lot of low hanging fruit to improve them. The failure modes are pretty dumb. It's like Claude, you tried to use the CLI command I don't have installed 14 times, and then I sent you the command to run. It's like that thing from a modeling perspective is pretty fixable. So I don't know.
I agree with you. I've been becoming more and more bullish in general. Speaking to what you're articulating, I think it is a human skill issue. So Anthropic is leading the way in or other companies in understanding how to best use the models for programming. Therefore, they're effectively using them. I think there's a lot of programmers on the outskirts. They're like, there's not a really good guide on how to use them. People are trying to figure it out exactly.
It might be very expensive. Like it might be that the entry point for that is $2,000 a month, which is only tech companies and rich people. Just like that could be it.
But it might be worth it. I mean, if the final result is a working software system, it might be worth it. But by the way, it's funny how we converged from the discussion of timeline to AGI to something more pragmatic and useful. Is there anything concrete and interesting and useful and profound to be said about timeline to AGI and ASI? Or are these discussions a bit too detached from the day-to-day?
There's interesting bets. So there's a lot of people trying to do reinforcement learning with verifiable rewards, but in real scientific domains where there's startups that are spending, like they have hundreds of millions of dollars of funding, and they have wet labs where they're having language models propose hypotheses that are tested in the real world. And I would say that I think they're very early, or they're early, but with the pace of progress, it's like maybe they're early by 6 months and they make it because they were there first, or maybe they're early by 8 years, so you don't really know. So I think that type of moonshot to branch this momentum into other sciences is like, okay, like that would be very transformative if like AlphaFold moments happen in all sorts of other scientific domains by like a startup solving this. I think there are startups, I think maybe Harmonic is one where they're going all in on language models plus lean for math. I think you had
Mhm.
another podcast guest where you talked about this
Mhm.
recently. And it's like, we don't know exactly what's going to fall out of spending $100 million on that model. And most of them will fail, but a couple of them might be big breakthroughs that are very different than ChatGPT or Claude Code type software experiences. Like a tool that's only good for a PhD mathematician, but makes them 100x effective. Like,
Okay, I agree. I think this will happen in a lot of domains, especially also like domains that have a lot of resources like finance and legal and pharmaceutical companies. But then again, is it really AGI again? Because we are now specializing it again. And then again, is it really that much different from back in the day how we had specialized algorithms? I think it's just the same thing, way more sophisticated. But I don't know, is there a threshold when we call it AGI? I guess I think the real cool thing is here that we have like the foundation models that we can specialize. I think that's like the breakthrough at some point. Right now, I think we are not there yet because, well, first it's too expensive, but also like ChatGPT doesn't just give away that ChatGPT to customize it. I think once that's going to be true in some way, and I think I can imagine this as a business model that ChatGPT, OpenAI says at some point, like, hey, Bank of America for 100 million, we will do your custom model or something like that. And I think that will be the huge economic value add. The other thing, though, is also companies. I mean, right now, what is the differentiating factor? I mean, if everyone uses the same LLM, if everyone uses ChatGPT, they will all do the same thing again. I mean, then, well, it's everyone is moving in lockstep, but usually companies, they want to have a competitive advantage. And I think there's then no way around using some of their private data and experimenting and maybe specializing. It's going to be interesting, yeah.
sitting in the pace of progress, it does just feel like things are coming. I don't think the AGI and ASI
Hmm.
thresholds are particularly useful.
I guess the real question, and this takes us to the remote worker thing, is when are we going to see a big obvious leap in economic impact? Because currently there's not been an obvious leap in economic impact of LLM models, for example. And that's, aside from AGI or ASI or all that kind of stuff, there's a real question of like, when are we going to see a GDP like
Hmm. Hmm.
jump?
Yeah, it's like, what is the GDP made up of? Like a lot of it is like financial services. So like, I don't know what this is. Like,
Right?
it's just
This
hard for
GDP
me to
isn't
think about the GDP bump, but like I'd say that software development becomes valuable in a different way when you no longer have to look at the code anymore. So when it is like Claude will make you a small business, which is essentially Claude can set up your website, your bank account, your email, and your whatever else, and like you just have to express like what you're trying to put into the world. Like that's not just a enterprise market, but it is a hard like I don't know how you get people to try doing that. I guess if ChatGPT can do it, like people are trying ChatGPT.
I think it boils down to the scientific question of how hard is tool use to solve. Because a lot of the stuff you're implying, the remote work stuff, is tool use. It's like how computer use, like how you have an LM that goes out there, this agentic system, and does something in the world and only screws up 1% of the time
Computer
or
use
less.
is a good example of what labs care about, and we haven't seen a lot of progress on. We saw multiple demos in 2025 of like Claude can use your computer, or OpenAI had Kua, and they all suck.
Yeah.
So like they're also investing money in this, and I think that will be a good example where that's actually something where it just seems pretty like taking over the whole screen seems a lot harder than having an API that they can call in the back end. And some of that is you have to then set up a different environment for the model to work in. Like they're not working on your MacBook. They are individually interfacing with Google and Amazon and Slack, and they handle all these things in a very different way than humans do. So some of this might be structural blockers.
Also, like specification wise, I think the problem is also for, arbitrary tasks. Well, you still have to specify what you want your LLM to do. And how do you do that what is the environment? How do you specify? You can say what the end goal is, but if it can't solve the end goal. With LLMs, if you ask it for text, you can always clarify, do sub steps. What is how do you put that information into a system that, let's say, books a travel trip for you? You can say, well, you screwed up my credit card information, but even to get it to that point, like, how do you, like, as a user, guide the model before, like, it can even attempt that? I think the interface is really hard.
Yeah, it has to learn a lot about you specifically,
Mhm.
and about this goes to the continue learning about the general mistakes that are made throughout, and then mistakes that are made through
Mm.
you.
All the AI interfaces are getting set up to ask humans for input. I think Claude Code we talk about a lot. It
Yeah.
asks feedback on questions. If it doesn't have enough specification on your plan or your desired, it starts to ask questions. Would you rather? We talked about memory, which saves across chats, which its first implementation is kind of odd, where it'd be like, it'll mention my dog's name or something, like, in
Yeah.
a chat. I'm like, you didn't need to be subtle about this. Like, I don't care. But the, like, things that are emerging are ChatGPT has the pulse feature, which is like, um, a curated couple paragraphs with links to something to look at or to talk about, and people talk about how the language models are gonna ask you questions, which I think is a very it's probably gonna work. The language model is like, it knows you had a doctor appointment or something. It's like, "Hey, how are you feeling after that?" Which is like, again, goes into the territory of humans are very susceptible to this, and there's a lot of social change to come. But also, like, they're experimenting with having the models engage. Some people really like this pulse feature, which is it processes your chats and automatically searches for information and puts it in the ChatGPT app. So there's a lot of things coming near
I
that.
used that feature before, and I always feel bad because it does that every day, and I rarely check it out. It's like how much money, like, I mean, compute is burned on something I don't even look at, where it's like, it's kind of
There's
like,
also a lot of idle compute in the world, so
yeah,
don't feel
fair.
too bad.